All right, we're going to try this again. I'm having some struggles this morning getting here on time and doing things the right way. But if you're joining with us live today, we want to thank you. You have found Family Friday. It's our weekly installment from First Baptist Church in Bonham, Texas. My name is Chase. I'm the pastor at First Bonham. If you are finding this for the first time and you haven't liked our Facebook page, please take a few moments to do that. You should be able to find it at the top of the page where you're viewing this, and or by clicking on the name of our church there and then going to like. Also, when you like, make sure you hit to follow. Facebook kind of has changed some of their settings, so if you want to see our content first, because we're a page, you need to hit follow and then see first. That'll help you find out information about the church, but also see videos like this when they become available. Also, help us out by sharing this video with all your friends and family. It is very, very helpful for you to do that. That gets the word out and helps people see these things beyond what we could reach by ourselves. And so you can help us by helping other people see what we have today, what we publish and what is we're talking about today. Now today I want to talk to you about marriage, and I'm going to be a little provocative in the sense that I want to try to challenge our culture's dominant idea of what a successful marriage is. And we could do this in a lot of different ways, but I got to thinking about this, of course, with it being Valentine's this week, and also with some of the things that come out, like the recent movie that came out with the third installment of the 50 Shades series, and some of these things that present to us an unfortunate alternative to a biblical view of marriage. Now today I'm not going to give you a review of any of those movies or anything like that. I just want to try to give you what is it that the Bible really kind of tells us about marriage. And this is, again, not everything, but I think it's the beginning point of an alternative view. So if our view of marriage is that we want to be in love or stay in love or keep the romance alive, then we have a vision of marriage that is too small and too weak to really bear the weight of the reality of life, and certainly does not understand or anticipate living out the ultimate purpose of marriage which God has placed on it. So I'm going to start here with a quote from Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He was a German theologian and was eventually actually arrested for opposing Hitler. But he wrote a pretty powerful homily or marriage sermon from jail. In fact, you can find it in a book called Letters and Papers from Prison, where he was in jail. And he says this: marriage is more than your love for each other. It has a higher dignity and power, for it is God's holy ordinance through which He wills to perpetuate the human race till the end of time. In your love, you see only your two selves in the world, but in marriage, you are the link in the chain of the generations, which God causes to come and to pass away to His glory, and calls into His kingdom. In your love, you see only the heaven of your own happiness, but in marriage, you are placed at a post of responsibility towards the world and mankind. Your love is your own private possession, but marriage is more than something personal. It is a status, an office, just as it is the crown and not merely the will to rule that makes a king. So it is marriage and not merely your love for each other that joins you together in the sight of God and man. As you first gave the ring to one another and now have received it a second time from the hand of the pastor, so love comes from you, but marriage from above, from God. As high as God is above man, so high are the sanctity, the rights, and the promise of marriage above the sanctity, the rights, and the promise of love. It is not your love that sustains your marriage, but from now on, your marriage that sustains your love. And what he's doing is he's drawing on this biblical idea that marriage is something bigger than just two people. A lot of times that's what we have. We're presented with in this world, that marriage is about two people doing something that they like together, and it's their love that connects them, right? This is what things like eHarmony and Match and all these kind of things are built on. Are you compatible? Do you work together? What sorts of feelings do you have together? And all that may be important in its own way, but biblically speaking, marriage is about more than two people. It's about actually three people, two people joined together by God above, living in an environment that has a purpose, right? This marriage has a purpose towards that larger community under the will and design of God. So I want to kind of lead you into two things this morning about what is it about marriage that we could say to try to give us kind of an alternative view, a biblical view, an alternative to the world's view. So this really begins in the very beginning in Genesis chapter 2, where we see Adam and Eve, the first man and the first woman, together. And God does something pretty amazing by taking a rib out of Adam and making it into Eve, and then God joins them together. He says, "For this reason, a man shall leave his father and his mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And the man and his wife are both naked and not ashamed." So we see here the very first marriage, and this is God's own doing, right? God's own work. A lot of times we think that marriage is the doing of men. It is something that is sanctioned by the state or anything like this. And sometimes there are good reasons for states to recognize marriage, and there are good reasons for us to understand the human place in marriage. But ultimately, marriage is not a work of man, nor a declaration of the state. It is, in fact, the very work of God. Jesus reiterates this idea in Matthew chapter 19. He is questioned about marriage, and about divorce. Can a man marry and divorce and then remarry? And Jesus answers them, and he says, "Have you not read that he who created them, that is God, from the beginning made them male and female, and said, For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one. What therefore God has joined together, let no man separate." So what we see is that each and every marriage is actually a divine act of God by joining two people together. It doesn't matter what the state says. It doesn't matter what that piece of paper says. Ultimately, what signifies and what grounds the connection of two people together is the very work of God. God designs it. God determines it. And so that means that no matter how much the government may say that two men or two women can be married, they just simply can't be. They can have a state-recognized union, for whatever that may be worth, but it doesn't actually ultimately mean that they are married, because it doesn't conform to the design of God. Just like, you can pretend the sky is green, but that doesn't make it so. And so we have to understand that from the very beginning, marriage is a work of God. And if it's a work of God, it has a purpose from God. In fact, this is part of the payoff that Jesus sees in Matthew 19, that if God joins two people together, then part of the purpose is permanence, and therefore let no man put it apart, let no man put it asunder. But what is it about this purpose that we ought to see? Well, Matthew 19 kind of hints at it, but then Ephesians 5, Paul comes and really teaches us about the nature and the point of marriage, that it has a higher purpose, a purpose to reflect what the relationship of Christ and the church is like. He says this, "Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself up for her, so that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of the water with the word, that he might present her to himself, the church, in all her glory, having no spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but we would be holy and blameless. So husbands ought to love their own wives as their own bodies. He who loves his own wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes it and cherishes it, just as Christ also does the church, but because we are members of his body. For this reason a man shall leave his father and his mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh." This mystery is great, but I am speaking with reference to Christ and the church. So what Paul is saying is that there is something about marriage that is about more than the two people and the love that they share. It's about a reflection, about a picture of Christ's own relationship to his people. And in fact, this is what makes failing marriages or broken marriages so difficult and so problematic and quite frankly wrong, because not only is it the breaking of a covenant between two people, it's a relationship problem, it's also a lie. It tells a lie about Christ and his church. It's designed to show the permanence and the love, the unconditional sacrifice that Christ made for his church, as the husband loves his wife and the wife loves him back. Instead, when we break that union, we're telling the world that the marriage, that God himself is not going to be faithful, which is simply not true. And so this is why we have to understand that love is an important aspect of marriage, but marriage is about more than being in love, staying in love. In fact, when I do premarital counseling, I often tell people that we're not going to use these phrases like falling in love and falling out of love and things like this, because that's not true. We make a decision, a commitment. We don't fall into and out of as if there's no part for us to play, because we have to understand that as we make that commitment to one another, no longer is it the thing, is our love leading us to the commitment. The commitment itself has founded and grounded the love that we will share from then on. The emotions, the romance, all that's important to marriage is not the thing that glues it together. The thing that glues it together is our commitment before a holy God who has put us together. Therefore, what God has put together, let no man put asunder. So what does this mean? That marriage is not ultimately about me and my wife. It's about something bigger than that. It's about doing something according to the will of God that showcases the gospel of Jesus Christ, that Jesus came into the world, He sacrificed Himself for a people, He raised from the grave, and has cleansed these people. He's married them, He's bound them to Himself in order that they might spend eternity with Him. So this is, in fact, what John Piper says in a great little book called This Momentary Marriage, and he puts it together really well. He says this: marriage is not mainly about being or staying in love. It's mainly about telling the truth with our lives. It's about portraying something true about Jesus Christ and the way He relates to His people. It's about showing in real life the glory of the gospel. Marriage is meant by God to put that gospel reality on display in the world. That's why we are married. That's why all married people are married, even when they don't know and embrace the gospel, in order to display to the world the nature of God and what He did in Jesus Christ. Now, a couple of caveats as we kind of wrap this up. Number one is this: this doesn't mean that love or feelings of romance or all that are not important. It certainly does mean that, because when a man truly does commit to his wife, he will continue to pursue her and show her His love, even as Christ continues to pursue us in some of our difficulties, right? He never gives up. He's always pursuing the intimacy of a good relationship. So it doesn't mean that love and the feelings of romance are not important, but it does mean that that's not the glue that binds a marriage together. And therefore, when that fades away, the marriage itself doesn't fade away, because it's not built on the glue of romance. It's built on the glue of commitment. Another caveat is also that it doesn't mean that we shouldn't strive to maintain the sort of love that led us into marriage, right? We want to grow in that. In fact, hopefully what happens over the course of our marriage is that love grows and doesn't wane. But here's the thing about that. Just the way that your love before marriage was built on effort and shared time and things like this are the same kind of things that it takes to have that in marriage, right? And a lot of times what we do is we get in a commitment, we become familiar, and then we kind of drift. But here's the problem. Everything that drifts usually drifts into the pool of trash, right? That's why when the wind blows, it all collects into, you get this trash like where we live. Sometimes trash and leaves and all this blows across and it all collects. That's where things drift. You don't get into a good spot by drifting. You get into healthy relationships and good places by working at it. Sometimes working in a lot harder ways than you would have anticipated. Anybody who's been married for a while will tell you that that's what marriage is about. Not just about feeling good and all these kind of things, but it's about working towards looking like Christ and the church. So, as you went through Valentine's Day, you probably thought a lot about the romance, and perhaps your husband didn't give you all the things that you want, or maybe your wife didn't do this or didn't do that, and those are important. Don't leave those things behind, but remember that a view of marriage that's only focused on the romance or only focused on staying in love is going to struggle, because the weight of life is going to bear down on that, and it certainly will not meet the ultimate purpose of displaying the gospel, where Christ loves the church and the church responds in obedience as well. All right, well, today I appreciate you joining with us as we did our Family Friday. We'll be back again next week on Friday as well. Please, if you will, take a moment to share our video. We'd love for you to make some comments as well if you'd like to share something about your own perspective on these things. If you happen to be in Bonham and you don't have a church, we'd love for you to visit us. We have Sunday school starting at 9:30, and also we have corporate worship starting at 10:45. We're located at 710 North Center Street, so it's really hard to miss us. If you have questions, you can always call the office, or definitely visit our website at fbcbonham.com. There's a lot of great information about visiting and the events that we have going on, different ministries that we offer. So make sure to check that out. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May His face shine upon you. See you soon.